Hello, everybody. I think we are live for another episode of the Visto Show. It is Friday, March the 14th. Q1, as the corporates would say, is quickly coming to a close. But anyways, hopefully your week has been going well. We've got a little bit of spring-looking weather up here in Canada, at least in Toronto. I say spring looking because usually what happens is we get a little bit of a weather tease in March before we get absolutely reminded about how the fact that we live in Canada and all this snow in April before kind of warming up for the summer. But anyways, we'll see what happens. Hope your week's going well. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you are joining live from LinkedIn, feel free to say hello in the chat. Feel free to drop any comments, questions, or anything like that. If you're watching after the fact on YouTube, well, you might be missing out a little bit, and you should still make sure to like and subscribe because it supports the channel. But if you ever want to tune in live, you can join me on LinkedIn. The link to my profile is in the description. Without further ado, let's jump in because we have a lot to chat about today. There's been a few express entry draws since the last episode of the Visto Show. There's been a fair amount of headlines from IRCC that I wanted to review. Talk of minister changes, right? They announced that Minister Miller will be out. I don't know if they've confirmed exactly who's in yet, but we're going to talk about that as well. And then lastly, I'll be on a couple webinars over the next month, largely talking about AI and immigration and stuff like that. And so I'll quickly highlight those and send you the links in case you want to check them out. So anyways, let us dive in to our first and one of our favorite topics, express entry. Now, before we do that, of course, I must take one of my patented Segway sips. Keep the mouth nice and hydrated, as they say. And let's jump right in. So I'm going to, as I usually do, I do one final refresh because you never know these days with express entry, right? When they won't be doing draws. So I always do a last second refresh just to be safe. Cecile says, it doesn't feel like spring in Edmonton. Well, does it ever feel like spring in Edmonton, Cecile? Hopefully your week is going well. Anna says Rachel Bendayan is the new minister. Okay, well now I know who to look up when we get to that segment. Anna, thanks very much for the comment, and thank you for tuning in as always. So first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about express entry. You can see here since the last episode of the Visto Show, we've had two draws, right? So on March the 6th, which is a little over a week ago, there was a very large French language proficiency draw, 4,500 people invited to apply with a minimum score requirement of 410. Certainly don't see many draws that low anymore, right? If I scroll down here, that's actually been the lowest score requirement in a long time. And on March the 3rd, kind of weird that there's a 3-day gap. Usually they don't have 3-day gaps between draws, unless, was this a weekend? Let me take a quick check. No, it wasn't. The 3rd was a Monday, and the 6th was a Thursday. So that's kind of weird. I wonder why they did that, or if there was anything kind of like in between that I can't think of off the top of my head. But basically, a PNP draw inviting 725 people to apply, and another big French language proficiency draw inviting 4,500 people to apply. You can see the session before that was basically the same thing, French language, which was even bigger, and a PNP draw, which was a little bit smaller. So it looks like, and you can see here if I scroll up, this is all of 2025 so far, right? We're almost a quarter of the way into the year, and pretty much what IRCC has done is a lot of PNP draws, a pretty good amount of CEC draws, and more recently, a couple big French draws. Kind of what, I didn't expect to see so many big French draws, but I guess French should no longer surprise me or most of us anymore. I did expect to see mostly PNP and CEC draws. They also obviously made that shuffle a couple weeks ago with the industry-specific programs, if you remember. So I think they scrapped the transport industry, and then instead they replaced it with teaching, and what was the other one? I think it's like education, like Canadian education-based or something like that. So anyways, kind of surprising in the sense that I didn't expect two big French language proficiency draws back to back. Try saying that 5 times fast. But I don't think it's a huge surprise to a lot of us anymore because they've just been so much on the French train, right? So not a huge surprise. That's the update. I don't know. What do you think? Are you surprised? Is this too many big French draws? Do you think they'll continue doing French draws? It seems like they will, right? They're very much still on the French train. And so anyways, it's interesting to see. So that's it from Express Entry. Obviously, it's one of our favorite topics, so we'll continue to keep tabs on it. And if you have any thoughts, questions, concerns, then please feel free to throw them in the chat. All right, let's chug forward. Fair amount of headlines to cover. This one was from yesterday, so the first one that I'm going to start with here, and I'll put links to these in the comments and the description as well. Canada to request a further extension to maintain first-generation limit to Canadian citizenship by descent. So I'll put this in the chat if you're on LinkedIn. If you are watching this on YouTube, you will find all of these links that I'm posting into the chat in the description below as well. So this was yesterday, assuming that you're watching on March 14th. Canadian citizenship is highly valued, blah, 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 blah. The Citizenship app currently includes a first-generation limit to citizenship by descent, which means that children born abroad to Canadian citizens beyond the first generation generally do not acquire Canadian citizenship. On December 19th, the Ontario Superior Court of Justice declared that key provisions setting out the first-generation limit for those born abroad are unconstitutional. The government agrees that this law, as it currently stands, has had unacceptable consequences for Canadians whose children were born outside the country. For this reason, we did not appeal the ruling. On May 23, 2024, we introduced former Bill C-71 to address the court's decision while upholding the value of Canadian citizenship. To address delays in passing Bill, I'm approving an interim measure to support those affected by the first-generation limit while Parliament considers legislative amendments to the Citizenship Act. Individuals in the following groups will be offered consideration for a discretionary grant of citizenship. So, what this is effectively saying is they're broadening the ability to get citizenship by descent, aka children born abroad to Canadian citizens beyond the first generation, right? So, for example, I have a kid and I'm a Canadian citizen, right? I move out of Canada and I have a child. That child may get citizenship by descent. But that child's child will not get citizenship by descent because the child wasn't born in Canada and the child's child also wasn't born in Canada. Now, they're making some changes. Those born or adopted before December 19 who are subject to the first generation limit, those born or adopted on or after, if their Canadian parent had at least 1,000 cumulative days of physical presence in Canada before their birth or adoption. Certain individuals born after April 1st, 1949 who remain affected by the first generation limit, those who lost their citizenship under the former Section 8. I'm not going to go into details, right? This is like, it is immigration related, but just, I don't know. It's like very, very specific, nitpicky stuff. So if you may or may not be affected by this, check it out. If you aren't affected by it, maybe you don't care all too much. But it was an interesting headline, to say the least. Cecile says, I like the idea of the French draws. I hope they provide, says the French speaker, right, Cecile? Not that you're biased or anything. I hope they provide appropriate support once those people arrive in Canada. In my opinion, lots of them don't speak English that well, and it might be hard for them to find a job once they're here. Yeah, I mean, a valid point, right? You're coming to Canada, and there's especially if you're coming to Canada and moving outside of Quebec, which would be required, right? Because if you're coming through Express Entry, it's not eligible for Quebec. So these are French-speaking people who may not be great at English-speaking moving to provinces outside of Quebec, which the majority of them are primarily English-speaking, right? So is there enough to help them integrate, to get jobs, et cetera, et cetera? Very important consideration and definitely a good thought and question. Moving on to the next title. Update on the 2025 Parents and Grandparents Program. This is from March the 7th. Excuse me, so 1 week ago. Family reunion, usually skip the first paragraph or two, right? Because it's like summarizing and blah, blah, blah. This year, IRCC intends to accept up to 10,000 complete applications for sponsorship under the PGP program, Parents and Grandparents Program. Given there remains a number of interest in the pool from 2020, IRCC plans to send invitations to apply to randomly selected potential sponsors from that pool instead of accepting new forms. This is the same approach conducted from 2020 to 2024. As of February, processing times were approximately 24 months for those destined outside Quebec, 48 months for those destined inside Quebec. To minimize wait times, IRCC strives to strike a balance between the number of applications received with the number of spaces available. I mean, if anything, this kind of just like sums up IRCC, right? Number one is you don't really know what to expect until you get the update year by year. Number two, huge backlog and large processing times. And in this case, it seems to be a bit of a shame, right? Because if you want to sponsor your parents or grandparents and you've wanted to over the last year or two, you can't even submit the application because they're giving out invites to people who submitted their expression of interest years ago, right, from the pool in 2020. What if there's people who submitted those expressions of interest in 2020 or whatever they're called, right, applications in 2020, and now they don't even want to, their parents or their grandparents don't even want to come, or the person has moved outside of Canada and so they don't even need it, right? I guess they'll just refuse the invite at that point. But just a bit of a shame that programs like this, they kind of get out of hand and get so overburdened that not only do the processing times become extremely, extremely high, but you can't even submit new applications now, right? So anyways, for anybody who needed to know that was their update as of a week ago. Again, read into more detail if you are very interested in it or learning more about it. We're not going to, read every letter of the update, but it's there if it does apply to you. Next up, Canada takes action to support housing with new immigration measures. This was also a week ago, March 7th. Immigration is essential, blah, blah, blah. Today, Mark Miller, former Minister of Immigration, which we'll talk about in a second, announced the government's intent to introduce a number of new measures to support the construction industry. These measures will blah, blah, blah. Blue, blue, blue. Skilled workers we need. Okay, where does the good stuff start? This advisory council, blue, blue, blue. Canada will immediately convene a tripartite advisory council. I don't know if I've ever seen that word before. Tripartite. What's that mean? Like three-sided party? Shared by or involving three parties, consisting of three parts. Okay, you learn something new every day. Comprised of federal government and union representatives and industry leaders. Okay. This advisory council will work to identify on-the-ground labor needs and advise on the parameters for potential pathways that will bring in and retain the construction workers we need for the long term with robust protections against abuse and a strong wage threshold. In an effort to build, IRCC intends to create a pathway that would offer opportunities for undocumented migrants in the construction sector. These are already living and working in Canada and are contributing to the sector, and this pathway will keep them here legally so that they can continue to build homes and blue, blue, blue. More information will be shared in the near future. So basically, finally, to support foreign apprentices, we are also introducing a temporary measure to allow foreign apprentices to complete their studies without a study permit effective today. By removing this barrier, apprentices will be able to gain the valuable skills they need. I do think this is smart in some cases, right? We know, or at least we used to be really struggling in the trades. I think we still are in some trades, electricians, plumbers, etc., etc. And part of it is we just make it so hard to come over from other countries and get recertified here, right? So I do think, especially in the trades, making recertification or certification to begin with a little bit more streamlined is a good idea. This program, I think it makes sense to me. I don't know. I think now building is kind of slowing down because real estate has really been hit, right, by the economy and such, right? So from what I'm hearing, a lot of the bigger building stuff, big condo and apartment development has kind of slowed down, but there's no doubt we're going to need a lot more of it, right? I always wonder on the undocumented side, I don't know if you agree if this makes sense or not, does knowing that the government once in a while puts out all these pathways for undocumented migrants, does it somehow make it more appealing to not follow the law and not worry about being documented and maintaining status. But the other way that I think about it too is like all of these construction workers that are here who have permits that are going to expire, right, or are right about to expire, and they have followed the letter of the law, right, and for whatever reason they haven't been able to extend or convince their employer to get an LMIA if needed, et cetera, et cetera. So I think in the long run it probably makes sense for our construction industry. It's interesting because I think construction has really slowed, at least in the GTA. There's so much real estate just kind of sitting idle, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And lastly, strengthening immigration and stopping fraud. Oh, if only. This was a statement from March the 3rd. Let me take a quick patented segue sip. Okay. The Honorable Mark Miller, blah, 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 March is Fraud Prevention Month, a time to address the harms caused by immigration fraud, both to people seeking a new life and to the integrity of our system. Fraudsters take advantage of hopeful applicants with false promises and high fees, blah, blah, blah. These are just facts. As we implement Canada's border plan to protect our borders and strengthen our system, we are also taking strong action against fraud. By safeguarding the integrity, we protect opportunity. Okay. 2004, we investigated an average of over 9,000 cases of immigration fraud every month. This led to thousands of applications being refused, tens of thousands of bad faith actors being banned from entering Canada. We introduced tougher penalties, including fines of up to $1.5 million for dishonest immigration representatives who helped their clients with fraudulent applications. We also took action to reduce fraud and express entry by removing the incentive to illegally buy or sell LMIAs in the hopes of having better chances. I mean, I still don't like that move. I think you're like blowing up the building instead of just going in and cleaning the den. But anyways, we can talk about that. In addition, we are working to stop misinformation about the international study permits and application process in Canada's asylum system. That's good. Those are highly, misused and abused. This is about providing accurate information to people around the world and helping prevent the exploitation. I urge all applicants to be cautious when seeking immigration advice. Only authorized representatives, licensed consultants, lawyers, or notaries can legally charge fees. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So it's more of definitely more of a statement, right? Just kind of like rehashing kind of what they've done. It does seem like they're starting to take it a little bit more seriously. I think one of the big problems with fraud in the immigration industry specifically is how hard enforcement is, right? I don't doubt that they're at the very least trying somewhat to regulate and prevent more fraud. But here's the problem. A lot of people who are like pretending to be immigration consultants or lawyers or, they're agents and they're acting inappropriately, a lot of them are outside Canada, right? So what are you going to do unless that foreign country is willing to kind of work with you? What are you going to do, right? Even if you're the most powerful government entity in Canada, right? Sure, you can fine them. Sure, you can ban them, blah, blah, blah. But if you have like an immigration agent scamming people overseas and they never plan to step foot in Canada, good luck trying to enforce anything, right? So I think that's the biggest problem. And then those countries tend to not care too much, right? They've got bigger fish to fry. They've got their own problems to solve, right? So that's one of the problems. There's a lot of problems, right? Number one, and they covered it here, is like education, right? People taking advantage. They don't even understand how the programs work. They're putting all their faith in like agents or unregulated people or sometimes regulated people who are just scammers and fraudsters. A lot of abuse over the last 8 years on study permits, partially because there was no regulation. The government didn't care. They weren't actually vetting study permit documents. The schools didn't care. They were getting international tuition. So what do they care, right? Their bottom line looked good. So that industry went totally off the rails, which is why over the last 16 months now, IRCC has made so many changes. The asylum system, which is really only supposed to be for like genuine refugees, is now being abused. But everybody and everyone is filing an asylum claim because number one, it's an easy process to go through, and number two, they don't have any other choice, right? All these students and workers that came here illegitimately and now they can't extend their statuses while they're just applying for asylum, right? Not to mention how much money is funneled into the asylum system that people are just abusing it and they don't even really care, right? So anyways, I mean, I could go on and on, right? LMIAs, I think this was a bad idea because what you're really doing is punishing the companies and the employees that genuinely need to or want to rely on the LMIA process. And yes, there was plenty of LMIA fraud, but the solution to fixing LMIA fraud isn't to remove the 50 bonus points you get from LMIAs, in my opinion. The way you fix that is you actually make it so non-genuine applicants don't get approved, right? To begin with, in my opinion. But anyways, that's just one man's opinion. So maybe worth a quick skim. I don't know, more of a statement stating some facts, no big announcement or any changes, but it does seem like they're taking it seriously. Hopefully they continue to, and we'll have to monitor to see how that goes as well. As always, if you have any thoughts, comments on any of those or new items to add, please feel free. Couple things. We're going to talk about so let me show you these last two links quickly. So I'll talk about the webinars first, and then we'll talk about the new minister. So 2 webinars I'll be presenting at. Number 1, hold on, I didn't put those last 2 links in the chat. Let me put them here and here. So the 2 big webinars I'll be presenting at on March 26th, so that's in like a week and a half, is the Journey Business Immigration Summit. So if you like business immigration, definitely give it a look-see. A lot of really cool speakers. Yours truly is right here, and where's the agenda? I'll be talking about AI in immigration practice, giving up on the boring, dialing up the exciting, scale with AI, automation, and operations. So it should be pretty cool. I'm a little bit biased, but it's free as well, right? So if you're interested in business immigration, then by all means, go check it out. I just put the link below, and it should be fun. The second one is CELA, Canadian Immigration Lawyers Association. I'm the chair of the AI committee, and we're putting on a webinar called the AI Toolbox, Custom GPTs, Deep Research, Copilot, and Practical AI Applications and Prompts. I will put a link to this. I have the UTMs because I send this out in the Visto bi-weekly, which you should definitely be on that email list if you're not already. And I'll put a link to this as well. And this is a really this will be a very practical session as well. I think you have to be it might only be open to regulated professionals and law students. I don't remember. Just follow the workflow if you are interested. Students. I don't know. Just go through the flow if you're interested, and you'll very quickly see if you're eligible or not. Now, lastly, what I wanted to talk about is the new immigration minister. Let's see, Canadian immigration minister, because Minister Miller is out. Oh, here we go. 18 minutes ago. Wow. And as was mentioned by Anna a few minutes ago, so Mark Carney, Canada's new Prime Minister, has announced his cabinet in anticipation of the 2025 federal election. Canada's new immigration minister is Rachel Bendayan, a member of parliament from Outremont, Quebec. She will serve as the head of Canada's immigration department, taking over from previous immigration minister Mark Miller. Cabinet reshuffles are a common occurrence and allow prime ministers the opportunity to reappoint to different government departments or remove them from office. This may be done for a variety of reasons, including to award ministers for good performance, to address poor performing departments, or to better align the government, blah, blah, blah. The last cabinet shuffle occurred July 2023. Minister Bendayan has held several roles, so let's go into, I want to quickly read about the background, including serving as the country's previous Minister of Official Languages. In addition, Minister Bendayan served as a parliamentary secretary, was born in a Moroccan Jewish family and raised in Quebec. She holds both a Bachelor of Arts in International Development Studies and a joint Bachelor of Civil Law JD from McGill University. Okay, so she's a lawyer. With nearly a decade of experience, she established a thriving legal career at Norton Rose, focusing on litigation and international arbitration with a specialization in international trade law. Okay. She is taught at the Université de Montréal's Faculty of Law. Pretty good background. What impact did Mark Miller have on Canada's immigration system? Significant changes. Many of Miller's policies follow along these themes around the contraction in temporary and permanent immigration. Okay. The importance of immigration portfolio, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, yeah, Miller's out. Ben Dayan is in. I don't really know much about her. Sounds like a pretty impressive background, although most of them do. I guess we'll have to see. In terms of Miller, I don't know. I didn't love a lot of what Miller did, but like, what was he gonna do, right? Number one, I kind of have a problem with how the minister system works in Canada, right? Because like what usually happens is every 2 years they shuffle up the cabinet, they bring in some new minister, they have a super impressive background, but it's usually not in that topic, right? So they're bringing in like a super impressive lawyer with all this experience, but they have no idea or not much idea how immigration works, right? Because they're not an expert in that topic. So number one, what I would recommend if I could wave a wand is like bring in experts from that industry to be the ministers of those industries, right? And then number two is they change them every 2 years. So I bet you a guy like Miller, really anybody, I bet you all these ministers that come in to do immigration, it probably takes them 6 months to like even learn what the heck immigration is and what the problems are, right? And then you get a year to like try to do stuff, and then you're out 6 months later, right? So I don't love how this like MP system works, but I don't know. Now I'm just whining, and what are we going to do about it anyways, right? Unless we can kind of change the system. Miller came in at a time where immigration was such a mess, right? Because the Liberals, in my humble opinion, pretty much kind of like ruined the immigration system in Canada from probably 2016, 2017-ish, even until today, right? It's just, I don't know. We're not going to go down that road. I have plenty of episodes and disappointment with the federal government and IRCC in basically what they allowed to happen from 2016-ish to like 2023-ish. And so really anybody who came in was going to have to kind of gut the system at least a little bit, or make big cuts to quotas and stuff like that. So what Miller did was not too much of a surprise. He came into a crap storm, right? So he didn't have, much to do. And my biggest problem with IRCC over the last year and a half is, number one, not much transparency. They just, and it's not IRCC over the last year and a half. It's really over many, many years, but especially now with all these changes coming, they don't give you much advance notice. They don't give you an idea of what's to come and what to expect and how to best try and represent your clients, and et cetera, et cetera. And that makes things very frustrating as an immigration professional. And then I think they went a little bit too far. I think they overcorrected. Yes, a lot of these changes need to be made. Yes, some of the changes I was pretty happy with. But like scrapping the LMIA points, I think was a little bit too far. I think they probably went a little bit too far on the study permit side as well, and now they're turning away the best and brightest. I think they went way too far in the changes to entrepreneurial programs, scrapping them, cutting them. What they did to ICT, I didn't like that move either. And now the best and brightest are thinking twice about coming to Canada, which is I think is a problem. But anyways, so I'm not going to say much more than that. I probably could rant for quite some time, but, you guys can only take my ranting for so very long. Or maybe you can't. Anyways, that's it for me today, folks. If you have any thoughts, comments, questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. Good topics today. Express entry, a bunch of those IRCC headlines, the webinars I've got coming up, the new immigration minister. It'll be interesting to see if she comes in guns blazing, or if it's going to be kind of a lot of the same, or I don't know, right? Especially with potentially an election very, very soon, potentially. We'll probably hear any day now. So anyways, that is it, I think, for me. Like I said, if you're watching live on LinkedIn, thank you very much for tuning in. And you'll find all the links to everything in the comments. If you're watching after the fact on YouTube, thank you very much for tuning in. Make sure to like, subscribe, all that stuff. Again, you'll find all these source links in the description below on YouTube. Make sure you're either or subscribed on YouTube for future episodes or following me on LinkedIn so that you can tune in live or watch the recording, after the fact. Anyways, that is it for me. Have a great rest of your Friday. If you're watching this on Friday, great weekend ahead. Thank you very much again for tuning in, and I will see you in the next one. Take care, everybody. Have a good one.